The universe had forgotten how to sleep. Across 17 star systems, the dying light of distant suns cast shadows on worlds that had once known peace. In the void between galaxies, something ancient stirred. A hunger that had devoured civilizations for millennia, now setting its crimson gaze upon a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. They called themselves the Vorthak Dominion. For 3,000 years, their biomechanical ships had swept through the cosmos like a plague of metal locusts, harvesting entire species for purposes too terrible for most minds to comprehend. Their empire stretched across the Andromeda spiral, built upon the broken backs of 100 conquered races. Each world, they claimed, became another link in an unbreakable chain of servitude. But Earth was different. The first contact had come on a Tuesday morning in October, when the skies above Geneva split open like torn fabric. Ambassador Jonathan Hartwell stood on the observation deck of the Global Defense Initiative headquarters, watching as vessels the size of Manhattan descended through clouds that parted like curtains before their impossible mass. The lead ship, a crystalline nightmare of organic curves and metallic spines, settled onto the Swiss plateau with the deliberate grace of a predator claiming its territory. From its belly emerged beings that defied every assumption humanity had made about alien life. The Vorthak stood 9 feet tall, their exoskeletons gleaming with an oily iridescence that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 4 arms ended in manipulator appendages that could shift from delicate surgical instruments to crushing claws within seconds. Their heads were the worst part, ancient compound eyes that held the weight of civilizations they had watched burn, set above mandibles that clicked with mechanical precision. "Welcome," the lead creature had spoken through a translator device that hung from its throat like a technological parasite. "I am High Executor Zythemoran of the Vorthak Dominion. Your species has been selected for incorporation into our empire." Dr. Hartwell had been chosen to represent humanity in those first crucial hours. A xenobiologist who had spent his career dreaming of this moment, he now found himself face to face with a nightmare that made his childhood monsters seem quaint. "We appreciate your interest," Hartwell had replied, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "But perhaps we should discuss terms." "Terms?" The clicking sound that emerged from Zythemoran's translator might have been laughter. "You misunderstand. This is not a negotiation. This is an inevitability." The holographic display that materialized between them showed Earth's position in a vast network of glowing lines, trade routes, supply chains, strategic positions in what the Vorthak called the Great Web. Humanity's homeworld sat at a crucial nexus, a perfect staging ground for expansion into the local group of galaxies. "Your species shows adequate potential," Zythemoran continued, studying Hartwell with those compound eyes. "Unstrong enough for heavy labor, intelligent enough for technical tasks, numerous enough to justify the investment. You will serve the Dominion well, and if we refuse?" The High Executor's mandibles spread in what might have been a smile. "Refusal is not among your options." That had been 18 months ago. Now Dr. Hartwell stood in a very different place, deep beneath the Sahara Desert, in a facility that officially did not exist. The Global Defense Initiative had gone underground, literally and figuratively, when the Vorthak had begun their integration process. Around him, the command center hummed with desperate activity. Banks of computers processed data streams from resistant cells across 6 continents. Holographic displays showed the steady erosion of human freedom as the aliens tightened their grip on Earth's major population centers. But there was something else happening in this hidden bunker. Something the Vorthak had not anticipated. "Sir," called Lieutenant Commander Rosa Delacroix from her station at the Quantum Analysis Array. Her accent carried the musical inflections of her native Toulouse, but 18 months of war had hardened her voice into something sharper. "We're getting another resonance spike from the Mumbai facility." Hartwell moved to her console, his eyes scanning the data that scrolled across multiple screens. The numbers told a story that would have seemed like science fiction just 2 years ago. But then again, so would the existence of the Vorthak. "How strong?" he asked. "Magnitude 7.3. That's the highest we've recorded." Delacroix's fingers danced across her keyboard, isolating specific frequency patterns. "If our theoretical models are correct." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. 3 months into the occupation, A Vorthak mining operation in the Australian outback had uncovered something unexpected buried 2 kilometers beneath the red earth, not minerals or fossil fuels, but structures, geometric patterns of crystalline formations that predated human civilization by millions of years. The aliens had initially dismissed them as natural phenomena, another curiosity of this insignificant backwater world. They had been catastrophically wrong. Dr. Amara Okafor had been the first to recognize what they were looking at. A theoretical physicist from the University of Lagos, she had spent her career studying quantum mechanics and dimensional theory. When the Resistance smuggled her the first samples from the Australian site, her hands had trembled as she placed them under her instruments. "These aren't natural formations," she had whispered to Hartwell during their first encrypted video conference. "They're artificial, manufactured, and they're active." The implications had hit them both like a physical blow. The crystals weren't just alien technology. They were old alien technology. Older than the Vorthak. Older than human civilization. Older, perhaps, than the Vorthak dominion itself. More disturbing still was what the crystals did when properly activated. Their space-time manipulation devices. Okafor had explained in subsequent briefings. Each crystal formation creates a localized distortion in the fabric of reality. When networked together, she had paused, struggling to find words for concepts that existed at the very edge of human understanding. They can create stable wormholes. The discovery had changed everything. For 3,000 years, the Vorthak had built their empire on one crucial technological advantage. Their bioships could traverse interstellar distances through naturally occurring cosmic anomalies, unstable wormholes that appeared and disappeared according to gravitational patterns that took centuries to predict. It was slow, dangerous, and required massive computational resources to navigate safely. But the crystals could create wormholes on demand. Stable ones, controllable ones. And Earth was riddled with them. "Sir," Delacroix's voice cut through Hartwell's thoughts. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Cell 7 in Damascus." The main display shifted to show the face of Captain Ahmed Hassan, his features gaunt from months of underground warfare. Behind him, the concrete walls of his bunker bore scorch marks from recent fighting. "Control, we have a problem." Hassan's voice crackled through the encrypted channel. The Vorthak had discovered one of the Damascus sites. They're moving heavy excavation equipment into position. Hartwell felt his stomach drop. The Damascus cluster was one of the largest crystal formations they had found. 12 individual nodes spread across 50 square kilometers beneath the ancient city. If the Vorthak gained control of it, "How much time do you have?" Hartwell asked. "Maybe 6 hours before they break through our perimeter defenses. The local population is evacuating." But Hassan's image flickered as explosions echoed in the background. "Sir, there's something else. Our deep scan sensors are picking up massive energy readings from the crystal network. Something's happening down there." Before Hartwell could respond, every screen in the command center erupted in alarms. Klaxons wailed as data streams from monitoring stations around the globe painted a terrifying picture. The crystal networks weren't just activating randomly, they were synchronizing. "Magnitude 8.7 in Cairo," Delacroix called out, her voice tight with controlled panic. 9.2 in Beijing. 9.8 in... She stopped, staring at her readings. "Sir, I'm showing a magnitude 10 event building beneath the Pacific. Grid reference 27 Delta Alpha." Hartwell knew those coordinates. Every member of the Resistance leadership knew them. They marked the location of the largest crystal formation yet discovered, a massive network of interconnected nodes that stretched along the ring of fire beneath the Pacific Ocean. "How long until full activation?" he asked. "At current rate of increase. 14 minutes. The implications crashed through the command center like a shockwave. If the Pacific network fully activated, the energy release would be visible from orbit. The Vorthak would detect it within seconds. And once they understood what humanity had found, all stations, "This is Control," Hartwell spoke into his command microphone, his voice carrying to Resistance cells across 6 continents. "Execute Protocol 7 immediately. All crystal sites are to be secured or destroyed within the next 10 minutes. This is not a drill." As his people scrambled to carry out orders that might doom or save their species, Hartwell turned to Delacroix. "Send a message to Dr. Okafor in the Cape Town facility. Tell her we need everything she knows about controlling these networks." And tell her, he paused, feeling the weight of humanity's future pressing down on his shoulders. "Tell her we may not get another chance." 3 kilometers above their hidden bunker, High Executor Zedemoran stood in the command chamber of his flagship studying holographic displays that showed the steady progress of the integration process. 67% of Earth's major population centers were now under direct Dominion control. Mining operations had stripped away significant mineral resources, while labor camps processed the human workforce with mechanical efficiency. Everything was proceeding according to plan. High Executor, his subordinate Quethnar, approached with the fluid grace of their species. "The planetary survey teams report an anomaly." Zedemoran's compound eyes focused on the younger Warthog. "Specify." "Seismic disturbances beneath multiple population centers. The patterns are artificial." The High Executor's mandibles clicked, a sound that had preceded the destruction of countless worlds. "Show me." The holographic display shifted to show Earth's surface, overlaid with a network of pulsing energy signatures that stretched across every continent. The pattern was too organized, too purposeful to be natural. "When did this begin?" Zedemoran demanded. 7 of your time units ago. The humans appear to be unaware of the phenomenon." But Zedemoran wasn't convinced. In 3 millennia of conquest, he had learned to recognize the signs of hidden resistance. Primitive species often possessed survival instincts that manifested in unexpected ways. "Deploy deep scan probes to these coordinates," he ordered, highlighting several of the strongest energy signatures. "And increase surveillance of human population centers. Something is happening on this world." As his subordinates moved to carry out his orders, Zedemoran studied the energy pattern more closely. There was something familiar about it, something that tickled the edges of his ancient memory. He had seen similar signatures before, on worlds conquered centuries ago, but those civilizations had been extinct for millennia, their technology absorbed into the Dominion's vast archives. "Unless, Quethnar," he called to his aide, "access the historical databases. Search for energy signatures matching these parameters. Priority access. Use my personal authorization codes." As the search algorithms began their work, Zedemoran felt something he had not experienced in centuries: uncertainty. Deep beneath the Sahara, Dr. Hartwell watched the countdown timer on the main display reach 0. Around the world, the crystal networks had reached full synchronization. Energy readings spiked beyond their instruments' ability to measure, and then silence. For 17 seconds, nothing happened. No explosions, no dimensional rifts, no cosmic catastrophes. Just 17 seconds of perfect, crystalline silence. Then the communications array exploded with incoming messages. "Control, this is Cell 12 in Moscow," came the first transmission. We have a stable wormhole. Repeat, stable wormhole. Diameter approximately 50 meters. Positioned directly above the Kremlin crystal site. Cell 4 in London reporting." Followed another voice. "Massive space-time distortion over Trafalgar Square. The entire Thames embankment is lit up like a Christmas tree. Rio de Janeiro here. Cristo Redentor is Jesus. Control, you need to see this." The main display cycled through satellite feeds from around the globe, each image more impossible than the last. Stable wormholes hung in the air above every major crystal site. Perfect circles of twisted space-time that showed glimpses of distant stars beyond. But there was something else. Something that made Hartwell's blood run cold. Through each wormhole, massive shapes were moving. Ships, not Vorthek vessels, but something far older. Something that had been waiting in the void between galaxies for the crystal networks to awaken. Sir Delacroix's voice was barely above a whisper. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures approaching each wormhole, ETA to Earth. 4 minutes." Hartwell stared at the images on his screens, watching as humanity's world transformed into something beyond their comprehension. They had found the crystals. They had activated the network, but they had also opened doors that had been sealed for millions of years, and something was coming through. All stations, he spoke into his microphone, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. Prepare for contact. Whatever comes through those wormholes, we face it together. 3 kilometers above, High Executor Zydemoran felt his exoskeleton shiver as his ship's sensors detected the wormhole signatures. The search of the historical databases had returned results that filled him with a dread deeper than any he had known. The energy patterns matched records from the Progenitor War, a conflict that had nearly destroyed the galaxy 3 million years ago. The civilization that had built those crystal networks had been the Dominion's greatest enemy. They had been defeated, their world scoured clean, their technology buried or destroyed, but apparently not all of it. High Executor, Kethnar's voice carried a tremor of fear. The wormholes are opening. Something is coming through. Seymour watched as his instruments registered energy signatures that belonged to ships built by a race that had been extinct for 3 million years. Ships that had been designed for one purpose, to hunt down and destroy the Vorthak Dominion, and humanity had just summoned them back to life. The first ship to emerge from the wormhole above London was a masterpiece of impossible geometry. Captain Elizabeth Blake of the Royal Air Force watched from her cockpit as the vessel materialized above Trafalgar Square, its hull gleaming with patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. The craft was enormous, easily the size of a city block, yet it moved through the air with the fluid grace of a living creature. "Control, this is Red Leader," she spoke into her radio, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I have visual on the contact. It's beautiful, beautiful, and utterly alien. Not Vorthak, their ships were all organic curves and biomechanical nightmare fusion. This vessel possessed a crystalline elegance that spoke of mathematics beyond human comprehension. Its surface was carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in dimensions the human eye wasn't equipped to process. "Red Leader, this is London Control," came the response from the emergency command center buried beneath Westminster. "Can you identify any weapons systems?" Blake adjusted her instruments, scanning the massive ship with every sensor at her disposal. Negative on visible armaments. But the energy readings. She paused, double-checking her displays. "Control, this thing is putting out more power than our entire national grid." Around the globe, similar scenes were playing out above every major crystal site, from the steppes of Mongolia to the beaches of California. Humanity watched as vessels emerged from wormholes that shouldn't exist, carrying technologies that defied every law of physics they thought they understood. In the depths of space, High Executor Zydemoran observed the emergence with growing dread. His flagship sensors had identified 17 distinct ship classes, each one matching specifications from the Dominion's most classified archives. Ships that had been designed by the Kethalani, the progenitor race that had nearly brought the Vorthak Empire to its knees 3 million years ago. "Analysis complete, High Executor," reported Koithnar, his compound eyes dim with fear. "Confirmed Koithalani vessel configuration. Class designation, World." The words hit Zydemoran like a physical blow. World Seed ships were not warships in any conventional sense. They were something far more dangerous, mobile civilization platforms designed to establish new colonies with breathtaking speed and efficiency. Each vessel contained the complete technological and cultural archives of the Kethalani race, along with the means to create self-sustaining societies on any marginally habitable world. But these ships had been dormant for millions of years. What could have awakened them? The answer came as his sensors detected movement on Earth's surface. Human military forces were mobilizing around every crystal site, not to attack the emerging vessels, but to protect them. The primitive species had somehow learned to activate the ancient network, and they were treating the Kethalani as allies. "High Executor," another subordinate approached with urgent reports. "Long-range scans indicate additional wormhole activity in 12 adjacent star systems. The network extends far beyond this single world." Zydemoran's mandibles clicked with mechanical precision as the full scope of the catastrophe became clear. The humans hadn't just found a Kethalani outpost. They had discovered one of the anchor points for the entire progenitor network, a web of instant transportation that had once connected thousands of worlds across the galaxy. A network that the Vorthak Dominion had spent 3 million years trying to destroy. "Dispatch immediate signals to all Dominion fleets," he commanded. Priority Alpha Authorization. Request emergency reinforcement from the core worlds. As his crew moved to carry out the orders, Zythamoran studied the tactical displays with the calculating mind of a predator who had suddenly realized he was no longer at the top of the food chain. The Kithalani had been defeated once before, but only after a war that had consumed entire star systems and left scars across the galaxy that remained visible to this day. And now they were back, awakened by a species that the Dominion had dismissed as insignificant. Deep beneath London, in a command bunker that had survived the Blitz and 2 world wars, Prime Minister Catherine Morrison watched the holographic displays with a mixture of awe and terror. The alien vessel above Trafalgar Square had been stationary for 37 minutes, showing no signs of hostile intent but also making no attempt at communication. Prime Minister, her military aide approached with the latest intelligence briefings. Reports from the other crystal sites indicate similar vessels have appeared above Beijing, Moscow, Sydney, and 14 other locations. No hostile actions detected. But what, Colonel? Ma'am, our xenolinguistics teams have been analyzing the symbols on the ship's hulls. They appear to be mathematical sequences, star charts, showing the positions of various celestial bodies 3.2 million years ago. Morrison felt a chill run down her spine. 3 million years. That was deep time, geological time, time that made human civilization look like a single day in the life of the universe. Colonel, I want a direct line to Dr. Hartwell at the Global Defense Initiative, and get me connected to every world leader who's dealing with these arrivals. If we're about to make first contact with something that predates our entire species, I want humanity speaking with one voice. As her staff moved to establish the connections, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at the edge of a precipice. Below them lay either salvation or annihilation, and the choice might not be theirs to make. The answer came 12 minutes later, when every vessel in the global fleet began to broadcast on frequencies that human technology could barely detect. Dr. Amara Okafor was the first to decode the signal. Working from her laboratory in the Cape Town Resistance Facility, she had been analyzing the crystal network's behavior patterns when her instruments detected the incoming transmissions. The signals were incredibly complex, layered data streams that contained visual, auditory, and mathematical components woven together in ways that suggested a form of communication far more sophisticated than anything humans had developed. It's not just language, she explained to Dr. Hartwell during their emergency video conference. It's complete knowledge transfer. They're transmitting their entire cultural database, history, science, philosophy, art, everything. Hartwell studied the preliminary translations, scrolling across his screens. Can you make sense of any of it? Some of it. The mathematical sections are easier. Universal constants, physical laws, things that should be the same regardless of species. But the historical records. Okafor paused, her dark eyes reflecting the glow of her monitors. Jonathan, these beings called themselves the Cathalani. They were the dominant civilization in this galaxy 3 million years ago, and according to their records, they were at war with something called the Vorthic Dominion. The pieces clicked together in Hartwell's mind with sickening clarity. The same species that's currently occupying Earth. It gets worse. The transmissions include tactical assessments, fleet movements, casualty reports. The war lasted for over 2,000 years and devastated hundreds of star systems. The Kithalani were losing. How does a war end after 2,000 years? Okafor's expression grew grim. According to their records, it ended when they activated something called the Long Sleep Protocol. They seeded their technology across thousands of worlds, then placed their entire civilization in stasis, waiting for the right conditions to return. What kind of conditions? The activation of the crystal networks by a species with the potential to resist Vorthak expansion. Okafor met his eyes through the video link. Jonathan, I think we were the trigger. Humanity activating those crystals sent a signal across the entire galaxy. We woke them up. Before Hartwell could respond, Lieutenant Commander Delacroix burst into the command center. Sir, we're receiving a direct transmission. It's coming from the ship over London, but somehow it's being broadcast directly to our location. The main display shimmered and resolved into an image that made everyone in the bunker step back in shock. The being that appeared on their screens was humanoid, but only in the most general sense. Tall and graceful, with elongated limbs that seemed too delicate to support its frame, its skin had the translucent quality of deep ocean ice. Most disturbing were its eyes, large, multifaceted organs that seemed to contain depths of knowledge that made looking at them feel like staring into the abyss of time itself. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in their minds, bypassing their ears entirely. Greetings, young ones of the third species. I am Archive Keeper Veltar of the Kethalani Remnant. We have been sleeping in the void between stars, waiting for the day when our ancient networks would call us home. Dr. Hartwell stepped forward, acutely aware that he was about to speak for all humanity. We welcome you, Archive Keeper. I am Dr. Jonathan Hartwell, representing the Global Defense Initiative of Earth. We're currently under occupation by the Vorthic Dominion. The being's expression, if it could be called that, shifted subtly. A scourge endures. We had hoped, but no. The pattern remains unchanged. Young species discovers ancient power, attracts the attention of the devourers, faces extinction or submission. But you defeated them before. Defeated? The sound that emerged from their speakers might have been laughter, if laughter could carry the weight of geological ages. We did not defeat the Vorphitek, young Jonathan. We merely postponed. For 3 million years we have existed in the spaces between spaces, watching the galaxy burn, watching species rise and fall under their dominion. Delacroix stepped forward. Then why did you return? Why wake up now? Archive Keeper Veltar's ancient eyes focused on her with an intensity that made her feel as if her soul was being weighed. Because this time is different. For 3 million years, we have waited for a species that possessed 3 crucial characteristics: the intelligence to activate our networks, the courage to resist the Vorthak Dominion, and the determination to survive at any cost. You've been watching us? Hartwell asked. Since your species first looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond. We have observed your wars, your achievements, your capacity for both creation and destruction. You are young, violent, unpredictable, and absolutely, utterly unwilling to surrender. The transmission paused, and when it resumed, there was something different in Veltar's voice, something that might have been hope. The Vorthak have conquered 1,000 species through superior technology and overwhelming force, but they have never faced a species like yours, one that treats impossible odds as merely another challenge to overcome. And they have never faced that species armed with Kethalani technology. Around the command center, Hartwell's staff exchanged glances filled with equal parts terror and excitement. The implications were staggering. An alliance with beings who possessed technology millions of years in advance of human science, combined with humanity's apparent talent for stubborn resistance, could tip the balance of a war that had been dormant for millennia. But there was something else in Archive Keeper Veltar's words, something that suggested this offer came with a price. What do you want from us? Hartwell asked. Want? The being's laugh echoed across dimensions. Young Jonathan, you misunderstand. This is not about what we want. This is about what the galaxy needs. The Vorthak Dominion has been spreading like a cancer for 3 million years. They must be stopped permanently this time. And you are the antibodies the universe has been waiting for. The transmission began to fade, but Veltar's final words burned themselves into the minds of everyone present. The wormhole networks are now under joint control, Kethalani technology, human operation. The Vorthak can no longer move freely through the galaxy. They are trapped in their occupied systems, cut off from reinforcement, forced to face an enemy that can strike anywhere while they can strike nowhere. As the image dissolved, Hartwell found himself staring at displays that showed tactical information far beyond human understanding: fleet positions, resource calculations, strategic assessments that painted a picture of the galaxy as a 3-dimensional chessboard where every move carried the weight of civilizations. And for the first time since the Vorthak had arrived at Earth, he allowed himself to believe that humanity might actually have a chance. 3 kilometers above, High Executor Zythmoran received confirmation of his worst fears. The emergency signals sent to the core worlds had bounced back as undeliverable. Every major wormhole route between Dominion-controlled space had been severed. His fleet was trapped in the Sol system, cut off from the vast military machine that had conquered the galaxy. How many ships do we have in local space? he demanded. 47 combat vessels plus support craft, Kethnar reported. Total complement approximately 200,000 Dominion troops. It should have been more than enough to crush any primitive resistance. But the humans were no longer fighting alone. And the Catalani had been preparing for this war for 3 million years. High Executor, his communications officer announced, "We are receiving a transmission from the human resistance leadership. Display it." The image that appeared on his screen showed the same human who had greeted him during first contact, Dr. Jonathan Hartwell. But this human no longer carried himself like a defeated representative of a conquered species. This human stood like someone who held the galaxy's fate in his hands. High Executor Zeidmarin, Hartwell spoke with calm authority. "I believe we need to discuss new terms." The clicking of Zeidmarin's mandibles filled the command chamber like the sound of breaking bones. 3,000 years of Dominion expansion had led to this moment, a confrontation that would determine whether his species continued to rule the galaxy or found themselves trapped in an ever-shrinking cage of their own making. The war that had been postponed for 3 million years was about to begin again, and this time, humanity would be fighting on the winning side. The first battle of the Second Progenitor War began not with weapons but with words. Dr. Jonathan Hartwell stood in the holographic projection chamber beneath the Sahara. His image transmitted simultaneously to 47 Vorthic ships and 17 Cathalani vessels. Around him, the command center hummed with energy that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the ancient crystal networks buried deep in Earth's crust. "High Executor," he addressed Zeidmarin directly, his voice carrying the weight of every human who had died in the 18 months since first contact. "Your empire has made a fundamental miscalculation." Through the quantum-entangled communication array, Zeidmarin's compound eyes reflected the bridge lights of his flagship. The Vorthak leader had not spoken for 17 minutes, calculating odds and probabilities with the cold logic that had built his empire. "Explain," the High Executor finally responded, his mandibles clicking with mechanical precision. Hartwell gestured, and the holographic display around him shifted to show the galaxy in 3 dimensions. Thousands of points of light marked Vorthak-controlled systems, connected by the delicate web of naturally occurring wormholes that had enabled their expansion. But now superimposed over that network was something new. The crystalline lattice of Cathalani transit points that connected every major star system in the galaxy. For 3,000 years, your species has controlled interstellar travel by monopolizing natural wormhole phenomena. You built your empire on the principle that you could move freely while your enemies could not. Hartwell's hand swept across the display, highlighting the Dominion's trade routes. But that advantage is gone. Every Cathalani transit point is now under joint human progenitor control. Your fleets can no longer reinforce each other. Your supply lines have been severed. Archive Keeper Veltar materialized beside Hartwell, the ancient being's presence adding weight to every word. "The long sleep is ended, Devourer. Your species faces judgment for 3 million years of conquest and genocide." Zeidmarin's image flickered as his ship's systems processed the tactical implications. Cut off from the core worlds, his local fleet faced odds that no amount of technological superiority could overcome. The Cathalani possessed weapons that had been refined during 2 millennia of warfare, while humanity brought something the Vorthak had never encountered: absolute refusal to accept defeat. "You offer terms?" the High Executor asked. "One term," Hartwell replied. "Complete withdrawal from all occupied systems. Return stolen resources and abducted populations. Submit to Galactic Tribunal for crimes against sentient species." The clicking of Zeidmarin's mandibles grew rapid, agitated. "Unacceptable. The Dominion does not negotiate with primitive species." "Then we are at war." What happened next defied every human understanding of space combat. The Cathalani vessels above Earth's major cities simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not retreating, but folding through dimensions that existed parallel to normal space. They reappeared 30 seconds later, scattered throughout the Sol system in perfect formation, around every Vorthak ship. Captain Elizabeth Blake, still patrolling the skies above London, watched as the massive progenitor vessel above Trafalgar Square became a point of brilliant light, then vanished completely. Her instruments went wild, registering energy signatures that jumped between impossible readings before settling into patterns that hurt to contemplate. "Control, this is Red Leader," she reported, banking her fighter into a tight spiral as she searched the sky. "The Cathalani ship it's gone. Completely gone." "Red Leader, this is Control," came the reply from the emergency command center. "Satellite tracking shows instantaneous relocation to Jupiter orbit. Transit time less than 1 second." Blake's mind reeled. Jupiter was over 600 million kilometers away. Even traveling at light speed, the journey should have taken at least 33 minutes. The Cathalani had somehow moved their ships through space as if distance was merely a suggestion. Around Jupiter, a similar scene of impossible physics was playing out on a scale that dwarfed human comprehension. Commander Kriksthal of the Vorthak heavy cruiser Devouring Darkness watched his tactical displays with growing horror as 17 Cathalani vessels materialized in perfect attack formation around his ship. Each enemy vessel was smaller than his mighty cruiser, but the energy readings they generated made his biomechanical hull shiver with resonant frequencies that spoke of weapons beyond his understanding. "All ships engage at will," came Zetmarin's command over the fleet communication network. "Target the larger vessels first." The Devouring Darkness opened fire with plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, sending streams of superheated matter toward the nearest Cathalani ship. The progenitor vessel didn't attempt to evade or raise defensive shields. It simply allowed the plasma to impact its crystalline hull and absorbed it completely. "What?" Kriksthal began, but his words were cut off as the enemy ship responded. The weapon that struck his cruiser didn't behave like any energy beam or projectile he had ever encountered. It seemed to rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in the space around his ship, causing sections of his hull to simply cease existing. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but erased from reality as if they had never been built. Around Jupiter's orbit, 47 Vorthak ships engaged 17 Cathalani vessels in a battle that lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When the weapons fell silent, 31 Vorthak ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of superheated debris. The remaining 16 vessels, their biomechanical hulls scarred and bleeding nutrient fluids into the vacuum, hung motionless in space as their crews struggled to comprehend what had just happened. Not a single Cathalani ship had been destroyed. High Executor Zedemorin stood in the ruins of his command chamber, his flagship's once proud superstructure now a maze of twisted metal and sparking conduits. Around him, his surviving crew worked frantically to restore basic life support as the ship's biomechanical systems attempted to heal damage that went beyond the merely physical. The Cathalani weapons hadn't just attacked his ships, they had attacked the concept of his ships existing in this reality. Entire sections of the fleet had been translated into dimensions where matter behaved according to different rules, then translated back as something that could no longer maintain structural integrity. It was warfare fought with mathematics rather than mere energy, and the Vorthak had no defense against it. "Status report," he demanded, his voice carrying undertones of something he had never experienced before, genuine fear. 31 vessels destroyed, Katna reported, his compound eyes dim with shock. 16 vessels heavily damaged. Total casualties. He paused, consulting displays that flickered with unstable readings. 63% of our fleet's strength. Zedemorin processed the numbers with the calculating mind that had served him through 3 millennia of conquest. The tactical situation was no longer merely unfavorable. It was catastrophic. His remaining ships couldn't hope to maintain control of Earth, much less expand into the local group as planned. But there was something else troubling him. Something beyond the immediate military disaster. The humans had watched this battle unfold, had seen the complete destruction of Dominion fleet's superiority, and their response had been silence. No victory celebrations, no demands for immediate surrender, no ultimatums delivered while his forces reeled from defeat. The primitive species that had somehow allied themselves with the most advanced civilization in galactic history was simply waiting. The answer to his unspoken question came 18 minutes later, when his damaged flagship received a transmission from the surface of Earth. Dr. Hartwell's image appeared on the emergency displays, but the human was no longer alone. Beside him stood Archive Keeper Veltar, and around them both was arranged, what could only be described as a war council, human military leaders, Kethalani archive keepers, and something else that made Zethamoran's exoskeleton crawl with primitive fear. Standing behind the human delegation were figures in power armor that combined Kethalani design principles with something unmistakably human in its aggressive functionality. The armor's surfaces carried mathematical equations that seemed to shift and change as he watched, while the figures themselves moved with the fluid grace of beings who had learned to operate in dimensions beyond the standard three. High Executor, Hartwell spoke with calm authority. I believe you're beginning to understand your situation. Elaborate, Zythamoran replied, though part of him dreaded the answer. Your empire has been severed. Every Dominion fleet in the galaxy is now trapped in local space, cut off from reinforcement or retreat. The wormhole networks that enabled your expansion no longer recognize Vorthak navigation protocols. Archive Keeper Veltar stepped forward, his ancient eyes reflecting depths of time that made looking at him feel like staring into eternity. But more importantly, young Devourer, your species now faces something it has never encountered: genuine consequences for 3 million years of atrocities. The holographic display shifted to show galactic overview with thousands of red points marking Vorthak-controlled systems. As they watched, many of those points began to flicker and change color as local resistance movements, suddenly equipped with Kethalani technology and human tactical expertise, began systematic liberation campaigns. This is impossible, Zythamoran protested. The subject species lacked the knowledge to operate progenitor technology. One of the armored figures stepped forward, removing their helmet to reveal a face that was unmistakably human, but changed in subtle ways that spoke of enhancement beyond mere biology. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond sound. You're Dr. Amara Okafor, Zythamoran realized, accessing facial recognition data from the early days of occupation. The physicist from Lagos. Enhanced physicist, she corrected, her dark eyes now containing depths that reminded him uncomfortably of Archive Keeper Veltar's ancient gaze. The Kethalani have been very generous with their knowledge-sharing protocols. Humans, it seems, have an unusual aptitude for dimensional mathematics. The implications struck Zythamoran like a physical blow. The alliance between humanity and the progenitors wasn't just military, it was evolutionary. The humans were being elevated to a level of technological sophistication that would make them peer competitors to the Kethalani themselves. And they were doing it with the stubborn determination that had made them resist Dominion occupation in the first place. What do you want? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Justice, Hartwell replied simply. For every species your empire has enslaved, every world you've stripped bare, every civilization you've ground into dust beneath your expansion, the galaxy has been under Vorthak dominion for 3 million years. That ends now, and if we refuse, Archive Keeper Veltar's expression shifted in ways that suggested emotions beyond human understanding. Then you face the same fate you have imposed on countless others. Extinction. The transmission continued for another 17 minutes, as the terms of surrender were outlined with mathematical precision. Complete disarmament of all Vorthak's military forces, return of all stolen resources and abducted population, submission to Galactic Tribunal for judgment of war crimes spanning 3 million years. But there was something else. Something that surprised Zethamoran in its unexpected mercy. Exile, not execution, Hartwell explained. The Kethalani have prepared a star system in the Magellanic Clouds where your species can rebuild according to whatever principles you choose. You'll have the resources needed for a sustainable civilization, but no means of interstellar travel. You would spare us? Zethamoran asked. Humanity has a saying, Dr. Okafor interjected, her enhanced voice carrying undertones of something that might have been pity. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. We've seen what 3 million years of revenge cycles accomplish. The galaxy doesn't need another species dedicated to conquest and domination. As the terms were finalized, Zythamoran found himself faced with a choice that would define the future of his species. Resistance meant extinction not just for his fleet, but for every Vorthak in the galaxy as human Kethalani task forces systematically liberated occupied systems. Surrender meant survival, but in exile that would make them irrelevant to galactic civilization. It was not really a choice at all. The Dominion accepts these terms. He spoke the words that ended 3 million years of Vorthak supremacy. But the war's end was only the beginning of something larger. 3 months later, Dr. Jonathan Hartwell stood on the observation deck of the New Horizon, humanity's first dimensional transit-capable starship, built using Cathalani technology and human engineering principles. Through the crystalline viewports he could see the Liberation fleet assembled in Earth's orbit, 17 Cathalani vessels working alongside 43 human ships that represented a fusion of technologies that shouldn't have been possible. Beside him, archive keeper Veltar observed the preparations with something that might have been satisfaction. Your species adapts quickly, young Jonathan. The mathematics that took our civilization millennia to develop, your people master in months. We're motivated, Hartwell replied, watching as the last of the Vorthak transport ships departed Earth's atmosphere, carrying the former occupiers toward their exile in the Magellanic clouds. 3 million years of oppression tends to focus the mind. And now, Hartwell turned to study the ancient being who had become something between ally and mentor. Now we keep our promises. Every enslaved species gets their freedom. Every stripped world gets assistance rebuilding. Every war crime gets documented and judged. It will take centuries. Then it takes centuries. Humanity didn't survive this long by being impatient. As the Liberation fleet prepared to transit to their first target system, a Vorthak mining operation in the Tau Ceti system, where 17 species labored under alien overseers, Hartwell reflected on the strange path that had brought them to this moment. 18 months ago, humanity had been a primitive species facing extinction or enslavement. Now they were junior partners in a galactic alliance dedicated to justice and freedom. The crystal networks that honeycombed Earth had become the command centers for liberation campaigns that would span the entire galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on him. The Vorthak had come to Earth seeking another link in their chain of conquest. Instead, they had awakened a force that would break every chain in the galaxy. The wormhole that opened before the Liberation fleet was a perfect circle of twisted space-time, its edges rippling with mathematical precision as the Cathalani navigation systems locked onto coordinates 17 light-years away. Beyond its threshold lay not just another star system, but the next step in a campaign that would reshape galactic civilization. Fleet Command, this is Admiral Hartwell, he spoke into the ship's communication array, using a rank that still felt strange after a lifetime of academic pursuits. All ships prepare for dimensional transit. Target, Tau Ceti system. Mission: liberation of enslaved populations and establishment of transitional government. Around him, the bridge crew, a mixture of enhanced humans and Cathalani technicians, prepared their stations with the efficient competence of people who had already liberated 4-star systems in the past month. Transit in 30 seconds, announced Navigation Officer Chen. No relation to the forbidden names, just one of the thousands of humans who had volunteered for enhancement and training in dimensional mathematics. As the countdown reached 0, the New Horizon folded through dimensions that existed between the spaces known to normal matter. For an instant that lasted both microseconds and millennia, Hartwell existed in a state where every possibility in the universe was simultaneously true. Then they emerged into normal space, and before them spread the binary stars of Tau Ceti, their light illuminating 17 worlds where enslaved populations had labored under Vorthak dominion for over 2,000 years. The liberation of the galaxy had begun. But perhaps more importantly, it had begun with a species that the Vorthak had dismissed as primitively insignificant. The same species that had looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond. The same species that had survived ice ages and world wars and had never learned how to quit. The same species that now controlled the wormholes the galaxy desperately needed. And they intended to use that control to ensure that the chains of oppression, once broken, would never be forged again. The universe, after 3 million years of darkness, was finally learning how to be free. Archive keeper Veltar stood in the memorial garden on New Geneva, watching human children play among crystalline formations that pulsed with the gentle rhythms of the planetary network. The garden commemorated the species that hadn't survived Vorthak occupation, silent monuments to civilizations that had been ground to dust beneath 3 millennia of conquest. Beside him, Fleet Admiral Hartwell reviewed reports from the latest liberation campaigns. 237 star systems had been freed from Dominion control, 43 previously extinct species had been restored from genetic archives found in Kithalani data vaults. The galaxy was slowly healing. The Andorian Collective has formally requested membership in the Galactic Liberation Council, Hartwell reported. That brings our membership to 87 species, and the Vorthak exile colonies stable. No attempts at military buildup or unauthorized transit development. Some of their younger generations are even requesting cultural exchange programs. Veltar's ancient eyes reflected something that might have been hope. In 5 years, humanity had accomplished what the Cathalani had failed to achieve in 2 millennia of warfare, not just defeating the Vorthok, but transforming them from conquerors into refugees seeking redemption. Your species continues to surprise us, young Jonathan. We calculated a 73% probability that you would choose genocide over exile. Hartwell smiled, watching as a group of human children taught alien youngsters the ancient Earth game of hide and seek among the crystal formations. You underestimated our capacity for forgiveness, and overestimated our appetite for revenge. Perhaps you simply understand something we had forgotten. That the goal of victory is not the destruction of your enemies, but the creation of a future where enemies are no longer necessary. As the binary sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Hartwell reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Humanity had been offered the chance to become another link in a chain of conquest and oppression. Instead, they had chosen to become the species that broke every chain in the galaxy. The wormholes still hummed with traffic, supply ships carrying aid to recovering worlds, diplomatic vessels facilitating peace negotiations, exploration craft mapping systems that had been forbidden to civilian populations for millennia. But the traffic now flowed according to principles of freedom and cooperation rather than dominion and exploitation. Somewhere in the depths of space, the crystal networks pulsed with the steady rhythms of a galaxy learning to be free. And at the heart of that network, a small blue world continued to spin around an unremarkable yellow star, home to a species that had looked up at the night sky and refused to accept that slavery was the natural order of the universe. The chains were broken, and they would never be forged again.